When a billionaire left his safe wide open with piles of cash, gold, and secrets, it wasn't by mistake. It was a trap, a test for the new maid who had just stepped into his lonely mansion. Would she take the money, or prove stronger than every betrayal that had broken his trust? What happened next inside that house shocked even the billionaire himself, and the truth will leave you speechless. So watch carefully till the end. Don't miss a second of this story. And before we begin, remember to like the video, subscribe for more powerful stories, and comment where you're watching from. Let's start. Jonathan Whittaker's life had once been a map of movement, transatlantic flights, late-night calls that bent time zones, suitcases whispered into hotel lobbies at 3 in the morning. He had negotiated ports and paper routes like other men collected trophies. His name sat in small brass letters on conference room doors and in glossy magazines beneath photos, where he smiled with teeth learned from polished veneers. Then Grace got sick, and the world rearranged itself around a quiet absence. The bluff house he'd built above Charleston, red brick, heavy iron gates, long rooms that swallowed sound, turned from trophy to mausoleum. He quit dinners, stopped attending charity galas, and traded handshakes for surveillance feeds. It was easier to believe in cameras than in people. The routines came like taut clockwork: coffee at 6, oatmeal at 6:15, the slow ritual of checking the monitors that liquefied faces into grayscale. He measured trust in logs and locks. The house hummed with technology: motion sensors beneath carpets, pressure plates in guest rooms, 16 cameras trained like patient owls on every corridor. He reasoned it was sensible. He told himself grief made him cautious. Caution kept him alive. But the body betrays the mind. His heart began to misfire. A doctor's clipped warning arrived with clinical kindness: reduce stress, find assistance, and suddenly the fortress he cherished felt like a cell. He needed help he could not fabricate into spreadsheets. So Jonathan did something he never envisioned. He placed an ad with a temp agency and wrote a list of requirements so cold it read like a legal clause. No social media, no friends who might gossip, no curiosity about family matters, a temperament that would respect boundaries more than presence. The agency, accustomed to applicants who lied on paper like small children, sent 3 profiles. 2 were discarded before the coffee cooled. The third made him pause. Maya Brooks carried herself as if she had learned from an economy of small things. 27, precise, with hands that curved like someone who had scrubbed kitchens and balanced ledgers for years, she arrived without a glossy resume and without questions about the man behind the gate. Her face registered nothing of the myths that trailed Whittaker. She did not ask if he remembered her hospital donation or if his fortune had softened him. When she asked whether the library should be dusted or reshelved by height, Jonathan felt something odd in his chest, something like curiosity but softer, like the space where a pulse registers after a long silence. On her first morning, he watched her on the monitors while perched in the surveillance room. She moved with economy. Pillows straightened, edges cleaned, wood shined, small rituals that made a house livable again. At 8, she reached the east wing of the mansion where Jonathan kept his safe open like a theatrical dare. He had left the door ajar, stacks of cash and jewelry arranged as if to tempt a saint. He leaned closer to the screens. Certain statistics would prove him right. Human nature succumbs when the need is loud enough. But Maya paused. Her hand trembled at the threshold, as if she'd been struck by a wind. She pulled a phone from her pocket, and in a movement that seemed to plead to the world, called the house secretary. She whispered. She listened. Tears pricked her eyes. He saw it in the tiny grayscale box, and then she did something he had not anticipated. She dialed her mother. On the feed he read the name, Lila Brooks, the family grocery on the south side, a mortgage that had tightened its jaw. The number she whispered, 38,000, was not a trivial figure. For a breath, a sliver of temptation brightened the hallway. She could close her hand, take a handful of bills, and her family would breathe. Instead, she knelt on the polished floor and entered a random sequence into the safe's keypad. The safe clicked and the light above the door went red. She folded the paper with the code and tucked it into her pocket. Then she sat down on a narrow chair and, alone in a corridor that had heard no laughter in years, let herself cry once, loud and honest. Jonathan sat very still, feeling a small dissonant thing uncoil inside him. For years he had expected gratitude to be purchased, decency to be a marketable trait. He had rehearsed tests and traps. But here was a woman who locked away temptation, not because morality was fashionable, but because for her the world still held fragile things that needed guarding, a grocery that fed a neighborhood, a cousin who'd survived an operation because of an anonymous donor years ago, a life measured by the small ledger of tomorrow's rent. When she finally stood and continued her work, hands steady, shoulders squared, Jonathan found himself stepping down from the dim of the surveillance room and into the long hallway for the first time in years. He had the habit of making everything permission-based. He would allow entry only when the conditions were met. He approached with a soft, careful gait, surprising himself. Maya looked up, wiped her face, and met his eyes without flinching. "Everything stays exactly as it is," she had asked about the library. "Dust only," he told her. Yes. It was the smallest of permissions and yet the largest. In a house built on alarms and old grief, a young woman's obedience to a simple rule felt like a small miracle. Jonathan extended neither gratitude nor question. He only watched as she returned to the day's work, arranging pillows, breathing as if nothing about the house could change her core. Only later, when the sun had slid behind the marsh and the cameras cooled to black, would he admit the noise that followed the cameras. Something like hope. It was faint, embarrassing, and profoundly human. He realized that for the first time in a long while, his quiet kingdom had received a visitor who did not tremble at gold nor bend to the weight of wealth. And in the way the house listened to her footsteps, Jonathan began to understand that perhaps trust, like a library's dust, demanded patient tending rather than force. The second morning dawned in a wash of pewter light over the marsh, gulls carving thin white lines across the sky. Jonathan was awake before the sun, not because habit demanded it, but because something like anticipation had unsettled his sleep. He stood at the kitchen island, a slab of veined marble that had known more delivery bags than dinners, and watched steam curl off a new pot of coffee. The house, usually content to be a museum, felt temporarily like a place where hours might actually matter. Maya arrived at 8 on the dot, as she had said she would. She stepped in from the service entrance with a soft clatter of keys and the faint, clean smell of early air. No makeup again. No jewelry. A navy sweater, dark jeans, sneakers that had done miles. She checked the foyer thermostat, propped the outer door so it wouldn't slam, and set her canvas notebook on the console table. No glance toward the cameras. If she felt their glassy attention, she didn't show it. "Good morning," Jonathan said, surprising himself with how ordinary his voice sounded in the space. "Morning, Mr. Whitaker." She didn't fill the gap with small talk. She opened her notebook to a page headed House Rules in block letters and stood pen ready. "Before I start, I'd like to confirm a few boundaries so I don't—" Overstep, he tilted his head. "Go on, library, dust only, no reshelving. Study, papers remain where they are. I'll only clear trash you've placed in the metal bin. Bedroom wing, do not enter unless summoned. Kitchen. I'll keep the counters and appliances clean, but I won't change the contents of the fridge. Garden, outside vendor handles it, correct?" He found himself nodding to each and then added, "East wing, no entry without me." Her pen paused for a fraction. "Understood." He poured 2 mugs and slid one across the island without ceremony. She murmured thanks, both hands wrapping the heat, and for a spare human moment they were simply 2 people in a morning. He caught himself watching how she stood, weight on the balls of her feet like someone waiting for a heavy box, not a compliment. He wondered who taught her that stance, what years had trained economy into her muscles. Work unspooled into motion. She moved through the rooms like a quiet musician finding the melody of a space. Fluff, fold, polish, pause. She picked up stray things without relocating them, a small kindness that made him feel less like a patient, more like a person whose life had been interrupted mid-sentence. From the doorway of the library, Grace's room, she asked, "May I open a window to air the dust? I'll close it before I touch the shelves." He hesitated. The library's scent, old paper, lemon oil, Grace's cinnamon sachets long gone faint, was sacrament. But he heard the soft rasp in his own lungs, the stale, sealed quality of a room too long preserved. "1 inch," he said. "No more." 1 inch, she repeated, and did not push for 2. By late morning, the house looked fractionally less like a monument. The difference was not dramatic. A straightened runner here, the light pulled open on the southern windows there. But in a place calibrated to control, even small changes were seismic. Jonathan retreated to the surveillance room out of habit, not out of distrust, and watched as Maya swept the east corridor without slowing near the sealed door. He should have felt vindicated by last night's ritual. The open safe, the locked door, the private relief he would not name, but what he felt instead was a pressure to be precise with whatever came next. He tested her in smaller ways that day, almost without realizing. A leather folio forgotten on the hall table, a credit card peeking from its sleeve, a registered envelope placed unopened by the study door. Maya returned the folio to the study with a sticky note, found near the dining room entrance at 10:17 a.m. Card appears present. Did not open. She brought the envelope in, set it beside his blotter and traced the tracking number in her notebook. No curiosity, just a trail anyone could follow. At noon he heard the faint, embarrassed growl of someone's stomach and realized it was not his. The house did not have lunch. The house had protein shakes and a freezer, where microwavable containers went to forget their names. He toggled a camera toward the kitchen and saw Maya pull a brown paper bag from her tote. 2 tortillas, a container of beans, half an avocado, a small jar of pickled onions electric with magenta. She built a quesadilla on the stove with the care of someone repairing something. The smell, not restaurant fancy, just warm, arrived in the corridor like a memory of how afternoons used to feel when Grace cooked on Sundays. He walked in before he could talk himself out of it. "I don't allow gas left unattended," he said, because rules were easier than yes. "Timer set for 3 minutes," Maya said, tapping her watch. "I'll eat in the service hall." "I won't use your dishes." He should have said nothing. Instead, "You can use a plate." She blinked and he realized he had offered something fragile. She plated her lunch and, after a beat of consideration, placed a second tortilla on the pan. She did not assume he wanted one. She made it and left it on the stove to keep warm as if for a ghost. He waited out the clock in the doorway and ate standing up with the unsteady gratitude of someone who has forgotten. His mouth could have a home other than coffee and vitamins. The afternoon brought a phone, call that prickled every old defense he owned. The intercom buzzed with the house line in the gravel of his lawyer's voice. "Evelyn asked me to confirm your attendance at the family governance meeting next Thursday," the lawyer said. "She'd like to discuss the coastal lots." He stared at the wall, at nothing. "No." There was a pause, a legal kind, filling itself with paper. "She said your absence would be noted." Noted. He ended the call and, through a reflex honed by grief and boardrooms, looked to the nearest camera, even though he already knew who was watching. Only him. He thought of the coastal lots, the ones Grace chose for their marsh grass and birds, not for the view price. He thought of the family governance meetings, which were never about family and hardly about governance. He thought of Evelyn's jaw, his jaw, and how she used it like a lock. Near 3, he found Maya in the laundry room, hands sunk into warm towels. The space was the most human in the house. Detergent on a high shelf, a jar of rubber bands, a single mismatched sock stuck to the side of the dryer like a small ghost. He stood in the doorway, unsure how to phrase what he decided to say. "Yesterday," he began, and immediately disliked how formal it sounded. "You encountered something in the East Wing." Her face didn't flicker. "I reported it to your secretary, sir. I assumed it was an oversight and then secured it. You didn't have to sit there after. You could have kept going." "I know." She went back to folding, corners sharp, lines clean, but it felt wrong to walk away while the thought was still loud. He had never heard anyone describe temptation with such plain engineering. Loud thought. As if morality were physics, and she simply refused to let momentum carry her. He watched her place towels in a stack, smallest to largest, colors aligned. "Leave at 5 today," he said. "You've done enough." "I'm scheduled until 6. "Leave at 5, he repeated. And the insistence sounded less like control than like a man learning to make room. At 4:30 p.m., while the house held that suspended quiet between day and night, Jonathan opened his desk safe. Not the spectacle in the East Wing, the intimate one with the family passports, and a postcard Grace had sent him from Beaufort with a watercolor of a blue door. He pulled out a checkbook, and for a minute just held the pen. The number he wrote was instinct, not calculation. 50,000, no memo line. No legalese, a sum too big for a tip and too small to matter to a man like him, except that it mattered in the one way he could admit, that it might tell her she'd been seen. He sealed the check in a cream envelope, heavy paper that whispered against itself, and went looking for her. He found Maya at the threshold of the library, a soft cloth in one hand, the window still obediently open 1 inch. The light slanted in across the spines like forgiveness. She stepped back as he entered, respecting the room's gravity without theatrics. "I owe you," he said. "No, you don't," she replied, automatic as a reflex. Then, catching herself, "I mean, thank you, but doing the right thing is part of the job." "It isn't, not in my experience," he offered the envelope. "This is for yesterday." She didn't take it at first. She glanced at his face, at the envelope, then to the photograph on the desk, a candid of Grace laughing so hard her eyes were almost closed. He knew what people saw in that photo, what he had lost. He wondered briefly and without warning what Maya saw. She accepted the envelope with both hands, a small bow of her head like she'd done at the door on her first day. For a heartbeat, the room held 3 people. The man he had been, the man he might be, and the young woman who had refused a whole chorus of loud thoughts in his hallway. Maya slid a finger beneath the flap and lifted it gently as if the paper itself could bruise. Her eyes moved over the number. Her breath did not hitch. He noticed that. Instead, a complicated expression crossed her face. Gratitude braided with something like reluctance, like history. She closed the flap again without removing the check and pressed the envelope flat on her palm as if weighing it. "Mr. Whittaker," she said, voice steady, "I need to tell you something before I respond." He waited. "Years ago," she began, "someone saved my family in a way we could never repay." The house seemed to lean toward her, as if the beams had ears. Outside, a gull cried one clean note across the marsh. "Tell me," he said. And in the inch of open window, the room took its first breath in years. Maya didn't sit. She stood at the library threshold, as if crossing it without permission might smudge the room's memory. "When I was 19, she said, "my cousin Luis was born with a heart defect. The kind that makes doctors talk in diagrams and parents forget to breathe." Jonathan's fingers found the back of Grace's chair. The wood felt cool, familiar. The pediatric wing downtown put him on the schedule, but the costs... She let out a small breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "We sold tamales in church parking lots. My mother took a second shift. I worked nights cleaning offices, and still, every time we thought we'd caught up, a new estimate came." Her eyes flicked to the inch of open window, to the marsh light sliding across the spines. A social worker called one morning and said an anonymous fund had covered the balance. We cried so hard I dropped the phone. Silence held, not the armored kind Jonathan wore, but the soft living kind that makes space. A few months later, Luis had his surgery. He's 11 now, plays midfield. I went back to the hospital to drop off thank you cards the kids made, and in the hallway there's this wall, names carved into brushed steel. One of the plates read, "Grace and Jonathan Whittaker Family Fund." She swallowed. I kept the name in my head like a lighthouse. It wasn't about money. It was the idea that someone I'd never meet believed a stranger's life was worth saving. Jonathan had made that gift the week after Grace's biopsy, in a fog of fear that made him throw money at anything he could fix with a pen. Grace had said, "If we are about to need mercy, let's seed some for someone else." He didn't remember adding family to the fund. Seeing it now through Maya's eyes, he felt the word land with its full weight. Maya looked down at the envelope in her hands. "So when the agency sent me your address, I knew the name. I didn't come to take. I came to work for a man whose wife dreamed like mine." He wanted to say thank you. He wanted to say, "I am not that man, not anymore." Instead he said, "Open the envelope." "I already did." A wryness touched her mouth. $50,000 is a lot of groceries, Mr. Whittaker. It's also a conflict of interest. He raised an eyebrow. "I'm on your payroll to keep your house. If I take personal money from you because I didn't steal, then tomorrow doing the right thing becomes a transaction. It stops being right and starts being paid." She set the envelope on the desk, palms flat. "If you want to help, if you truly want to, put this into something that helps more than us. But I can't cash it." Grace would have liked her, Jonathan thought. Not for the refusal, but for the clarity. "What would something look like?" he asked. Maya's answer came without flourish. "Emergency relief for the employees in your orbit. The gardeners, the drivers, the folks the world doesn't see until a transmission dies or a kid gets sick. No names, no speeches, quiet paperwork that keeps lights on. He studied her. People usually came to him with hunger dressed as vision. She brought vision armored by boundaries. He crossed to the desk, slid open a drawer and took out a leather folio, dark, scuffed at the corners. He had avoided touching it for 2 years. This, he said, laying it between them, is the Winter Trust Foundation. Grace and I set it up to give without doing press tours. After she died, I stopped running it because everything felt performative. He met her eyes. I want you to lead it. The sentence hovered in the library like dust illuminated by light. Maya didn't reach for the folder. Her fingers curled against her palms. I clean houses, she said. You steward people, he corrected. Houses are what you happen to be cleaning. He nudged the folio closer. You will have a board, an independent auditor, and the authority to say no to me. Especially to me. She let out a breath that trembled at the edges. Sir, with respect, I didn't go to the right schools. I don't wear the right... She glanced at her navy sweater, the sensible sneakers. Costume. Good, he said too quickly. He softened it. Good. The last thing this needs is another person fluent in Gala. He tapped the folio. If you accept, you'll design the charter. Publish minutes. Post-grant criteria. In plain English and Spanish. No naming rights. No photos of me handing checks to children. Call it whatever feels like light instead of legacy. Her eyes moved to the window, to the thin square of marsh and sky. Marshlight, she said, almost to herself. That's what we call the way the creek catches the sun in the morning. Then the Winter Trust operates as marshlight in public, he said. Done. Not done, she said, and some small fire lit behind her reserve. Terms transparency quarterly. A hotline for complaints that doesn't ring in your office. No grants to any entity where your family has a financial interest. And I recuse myself from any decision that touches my family, our store, or our block. He felt a smile ease onto his face, unpracticed, but true. You drive a hard bargain, Ms. Brooks. I've seen easy bargains, she said. They cost more later. He nodded, remembering boardrooms where handshakes hid knives. Salary, he said. You'll need one. I don't want anything that looks like a reward for yesterday. It won't be. He gave her a number. Market competitive, not extravagant, indexed to what non-profit directors in the state actually earned. You'll also hire counsel and a CPA who don't owe me favors, she considered. I need 48 hours. Take 72, he said, surprising himself. And take the folio with you. She lifted the leather slowly, as if testing whether some unseen alarm would sound. Nothing did. She held the weight like it might tip her. May I ask one thing in return, she said. Yes. Stop testing me with forgotten credit cards and staged envelopes. If you want to know who I am, ask me. I'll tell you. If that isn't enough, fire me. But don't turn your house into a moral obstacle course and then blame people for tripping. He had not expected to feel shame. Jet came anyway, clean, bracing like a tide. Fair, he said. Consider the course closed. On her way out, she paused at the photograph of Grace laughing. She looks like someone who would have opened windows all the way, Maya said. She did, he said, the words finding him rather than the other way around. After she left, Jonathan stood alone in the library, the check still on the desk. He thought of the word Maya had chosen, marshlight, and of how it wasn't about him at all. He dialed his attorney, and for the first time in months, the call was not a refusal. We're reactivating the Winter Trust, he said. New public name. New director. Draft bylaws that protect her from me, the lawyer coughed. From you? From my worst instincts, Jonathan said, and hung up before caution could talk him out of it. Maya walked the 6 blocks from the bus stop to the grocery, with the folio pressed to her chest. The bell over the door rang with its familiar tiredness. Fluorescence hummed. A final notice hung crooked on the corkboard in back. Lila looked up from the counter, reading her daughter's face like weather. You're carrying something heavy, Lila said. It's not money, Maya answered, but it might be better. They sat at the little table where kids did homework, and the credit card terminal went to sulk when it lost the signal. Maya explained as carefully as she could. The fund, the offer, the conditions she planned to insist on. When she finished, Lila leaned back and studied her the way she'd studied mangoes for ripeness. since Maya was small. "Your grandfather used to say honor is a habit, not an event," Lila said. "Make it a habit in whatever this is. Don't let it become a show." "I won't. And don't save the store first," Lila added, gentle but immovable. "If this thing is to be honest, let it help the town like it helped Luis. We'll find a way to keep the lights on until it's right for us to apply like everyone else." Maya closed her eyes for a moment. Relief and fear tangled in her chest. Okay. That night she spread the folio on her kitchen table, next to a chipped mug and a spiral notebook that still smelled like paper aisle. She outlined a 90-day plan. Hire counsel, audit the old books, draft plain language criteria, list conflicts, map the places where $1,000 made more difference than 100,000 ever could. She wrote Marshlight at the top of the page and underlined it twice. 3 mornings later, she returned to the Bluff House. The gulls were louder, or maybe she just heard them now. She found Jonathan in the library, the window open 2 inches this time, as if the room had decided it could survive a little more air. "I accept," she said, "on the terms we discussed. And one more." He waited. "You will not use Marshlight to fight your children," she said. "Whatever wars you've got, property, legacy, whatever you rich people call it, that stays out of the foundation. We serve the town, not your grudges." He let the reprimand land. "Agreed." She held out her hand, not a supplicant's palm, but a partner's. He took it. Her grip was firm, brief, business. "Then let's open some windows," she said. And in the quiet that followed, the house did what old houses sometimes do when they finally remember why they were built. It exhaled. Marshlight didn't launch with ribbon cuttings or a podium. It began on a Wednesday night in the back room of St. Bart's Community Center, the cheapest room they could rent, that had both folding chairs and a coffee pot that didn't leak. A whiteboard leaned at an angle against cinder block. Maya arrived early with a box of spiral notebooks, a roll of painter's tape, and a stack of paper placards she'd lettered herself. Ruth Delgado, retired librarian; Hank Morales, dockworker, rep; Preya Shah, clinic nurse; Latrice Monroe, small business owner. No donors, no gala chairs. Just people whose phones buzzed at 2 a.m. when real things broke. Jonathan stood by the coffee, as if it might interrogate him. He wore a blue sport coat that had not been out of the closet in months. It looked relieved to see daylight. He said little and listened more while counsel, Aria Feldman, hair up, sentences sharper than her heels, walked the board through governance, open minutes, public criteria, conflicts policy. Elliot Zane, the CPA who'd spent years untangling crooked nonprofits, took a chair at the end of the table and said, "If you want clean books, you need clean habits. Start ugly if you have to, but start honest." Maya taped a phone number on the wall in block letters, Marshlight Hotline, NES. "No names required," she said. "If we mess up, tell us. If someone here crosses a line, ring this first. It does not forward to Mr. Whitaker." Ruth Delgado, grey braid bifocals on a beaded chain, squinted at Jonathan like a librarian, deciding whether to forgive a late fee. "Sir, I don't care how much you give," she said. "If you so much as try to steer one grant to a pet project, I'll walk. And I'll take the story to the paper." "Please do," Jonathan answered, surprising himself with the answer and the loose laugh that followed. "I've steered enough ships." They voted the bylaws line by line. They chose Marshlight as the public name, kept Winter Trust Foundation on the filings, and adopted a charter so plain even the coffee pot could understand it. Emergency relief under $2,500, micro repairs under $5,000, legal aid referrals, no checks to relatives or businesses within 2 degrees of any board member. Grants posted weekly with amounts and zip codes, no names. Transparency first, speed second, pride never. By Friday morning, the hotline pinged like rain on tin. A caregiver whose minivan transmission died on the way to a night shift. An electrician with shingles who couldn't climb ladders for 6 weeks. A daycare with a burst pipe and 3 days of lost tuition. Maya sat at a borrowed desk in a former tax prep storefront, feet on cold tile, and triaged with a stopwatch, a spreadsheet, and a conscience. Priya called the clinic to verify a bill. Ruth cross-checked a landlord who had misplaced receipts. Hank negotiated with a tow yard that had developed a taste for cars, poor enough to auction quick. At noon, Lila arrived at the door with sandwiches wrapped in foil. She set them down, took in the grimy blinds, the second-hand chairs, and kissed the top of Maya's head as if to bless the room. "You're building a thing that fits in small hands," she said. "Good." "Ma," Maya warned gently, "we can't process the store's application until next quarter." We wrote it down. Leela held up both palms. "I came with food, not forms." Across town, a different table had gathered. Evelyn and Caleb sat at a long conference table at Whitaker Holdings. Glass walls, river view, a bowl of green apples gleaming like engineered health. Their lawyer Voss had a voice that could stain mahogany. "We're moving forward on Whitaker Landing," Evelyn said, tapping a rendering on the screen. Marina slips, condos, a public promenade that felt privatized from 50 feet away. Phase 1 requires control of the 3 coastal lots and favorable PR. If Marshlight is operating, it can launder our image and cover displacement with a sprinkling of micro-grants. Caleb's smile was paper. "A rising tide, Evie. Dad's always loved boats." Voss slid a folder forward. "We've engaged Halsey & Cosin to draft language. Through a landmark partnership with Marshlight, Whitaker Holdings will invest in community resilience as it brings jobs to the waterfront. Mr. Whitaker's quote can be manufactured or coerced," Evelyn said, eyes pale and flat. "He wants to hide in that museum of his. He can do it after he signs." When Jonathan received the email 2 hours later, subject, draft press release for review, he read the first paragraph and felt the old armor clatter into place. He forwarded it to Maya with a single line. "Did you authorize this?" Maya read it in the storefront office with a mouthful of Lila's sandwich. The language was sleek, engineered to smudge motives, to turn a foundation for emergencies into a PR hose for a developer's project. She called Arya. "Cease and desist," Arya said without looking it up. "And log everything. We'll want provenance if this goes public." "Do I respond to Evelyn?" Maya asked. Arya's no was immediate. "Respond to their counsel. No private texts. No hallway deals. They'll try to make you choose between being rude and being compromised." That afternoon, Marshlight cut its first checks. Not photogenic ones, no balloons, no novelty, just ACH transfers and printed receipts. An electrician named Jose received $200 to keep his shop lease. A single mother named Bree got $580 to avoid a utility shutoff. The daycare's pipe was patched by a plumber who agreed to half rate if Marshlight paid the other half up front. Maya wrote verified next to each line and stuck the receipts in color-coded folders like a woman building a dam 1 stone at a time. At 5, her phone vibrated with a number she didn't recognize. She answered anyway. The voice was male, practiced, pleasant. "Ms. Brooks. Philip Crane here, Southeastern Harbor Capital. We're reaching out regarding the Brooks grocery balloon payment scheduled for Friday. We have options. Interest-only extension or a partner buy-in that could relieve pressure. For the right collaborators." Maya put him on speaker so Lila could hear. "We'll submit an application through Marshlight next quarter like everyone else," she said. "We admire your integrity," Crane said, managing to make the word sound expensive. "But I'm not calling as a charity. I'm calling with a deal." He paused, let the hook sink. "Our fund is prepared to purchase your note. In exchange, we'd love an introduction to Mr. Whitaker. We believe our redevelopment arm and Whitaker Holdings have aligned visions." Lila's eyebrows went up. Maya's went down. "We don't broker introductions," Maya said. "And I won't trade my mother's store for anyone's PR." "Think on it," Crane said, the smile audible. "Clocks are hungry." After he hung up, Maya searched the state registry for Southeastern Harbor Capital. Parent company, E&M Holdings. She clicked deeper, past layers of LLCs named after birds and street corners. One filing caught her breath. E&M's board included a non-voting advisory entity. WHTR Family Office. Whitaker. Not Jonathan's hand, nothing so obvious, but a shadow of the family money parked like a car idling at the curb. She printed the page, circled the relevant lines, and slid the copy into a new folder. Conflicts Whitaker. Then she wrote in thick pen, a rule she had drafted but not yet said out loud. If it touches the family, it does not touch Marshlight. At dusk, Maya took the bus to the Bluff House with a stack of updates. She found Jonathan on the back terrace, jacket off, sleeves rolled, the river's skin going silver under the last light. He had the press release printed, as if it needed to be weighed down with ink to be believed. "I didn't authorize this," he said. "I know," she said, holding up Arya's cease and desist. We responded, "Publicly if they push it." Jonathan stared out toward the marsh where Grace had once pointed at birds and listed their names like neighbors. "They think if they put our names in the same sentence enough times, the sentence becomes true." "They're not wrong," Maya said. "That's how sentences work." She handed him the E&M printout. "Your children's money is kissing distance from the bank strangling our block," he read, jaw setting. "WHTR family office is a wrapper," he said. "Tax efficient. Opaque by design." He set the page down with care that read as fury. "They think my silence equals consent." "Then don't be silent," Maya said. "Not through Marshlight. Not through me. You handle your family as a father. I'll handle the foundation as a director." He looked at her, and for a beat the roles inverted. She the unmoved, he the one seeking permission to be human. He nodded once. "Understood." They drafted a statement together at the kitchen island. Marshlight was independent, unaffiliated with Whitaker Holdings. No partnerships pending with any redevelopment firm. All grants public. All decisions by board vote. No exceptions. Jonathan insisted his name be omitted entirely. Maya insisted the language be understandable to a tired parent at midnight. Before she left, a small scene interrupted the careful work of boundaries. The intercom buzzed. A delivery, no sender listed, left at the gate. The guard brought up a flat envelope, heavy, unmarked. Jonathan's fingers hesitated over the flap. Maya stepped back. It was his house, his ghosts. He opened it. Inside lay a single object, a hospital donor plaque rubbing, the kind kids make with thin paper and a crayon. The charcoal letters read, "Grace and Jonathan Whitaker Family Fund." Underneath, in a square of newsprint clipped with care, a headline, "Whitaker landing to break ground by summer." Someone had circled the word family on both pieces and drawn a question mark between them. "No note, no signature. Who sent it?" Maya asked. "The city," Jonathan said, almost to himself. "Or the past. They look the same at night." He tucked the rubbing into the cookbook where Grace used to keep recipes for Sunday bread, the ones that made the house smell like life. Then he walked Maya to the door. "Tomorrow," she said, "we're meeting at the clinic. They're 2 days from a power shutoff. If the lights go, the vaccine fridge goes with them. I want you there, not as a donor, as a man who can sit in a fluorescent waiting room without flinching." He almost said no out of habit. He heard himself say, "What time?" 8 sharp. The next morning, the clinic lobby held all the familiar indignities of American healthcare. A flickering TV with closed captions, a stack of forms that required the same answers on 4 different pages, a mother rocking a colicky baby, a grandfather studying a prescription bottle like it was written in ancient code. Priya met them with a ledger and a face that had forgotten sleep. "Power company wants $3,640 by 5, she said. "We've got 1,900 liquid. If the fridge warms up, we lose insulin, vaccines, and 3 vials of something I can't pronounce that cost more than my car." Maya opened the Marshlight checkbook. "We can cover the gap. But I want receipts and a maintenance schedule. And I want your board to pass a budget that includes a utilities reserve." "Bossy," Priya said, smiling with relief. "I like it." While paperwork churned, a boy in a soccer jersey ran down the hall, stopped, and doubled back to peer at Maya's face. "Ms. Brooks?" he said. "It's me, Luis." He was taller now, cheeks sharp with growth, hair too long for his mother's taste. "Coach says I might make varsity next year." Maya's composure tilted for a second. She squeezed his shoulder and told him about varsity buses and homework and electrolytes in August heat. After he left, Jonathan watched her write the clinic's check with hands that didn't shake. A man stood by the door then, pressed shirt, neutral tie, hands folded like a church usher. He wasn't from the clinic. He wasn't from the neighborhood. He raised a phone and took a picture at the exact moment Maya passed the envelope to Priya. "Excuse me," Maya said, stepping toward him. He smiled the way people smile when they already have what they came for. "Public figure," he said, and walked out before anyone could ask who he served. By the time they reached the sidewalk, the photo was already on a local news account with a caption that did the work. Evelyn had hoped the press release would do. "Housekeeper turned director. Seen handing envelope. Community funds or Whitaker payoff." Jonathan felt the old panic reach for his throat. Maya felt it and swatted it away with a sentence as crisp as morning air. "We don't chase lies," she said. "We post receipts." They did. Elliot put the paid invoice on the Marshlight site with a timestamp, and the utility account redacted. Priya commented, first with gratitude, then with the exact kilowatt usage for the vaccine fridge and the temperature range it needed to survive. Ruth posted a reminder in the comments about public meetings. Hank added, "Come to the next board night. There's coffee." The smear didn't vanish. Lies don't delete. They dilute. But the truth grew heavier by the hour, made of more than a photo. It was names in small type on a ledger and a clinic with humming lights. That night, Maya locked the storefront and walked to the bus stop. Across the street, a black sedan idled. A window hummed down. Philip Crane leaned so she could see the careful half-smile he wore like armor. "Clocks are still hungry," he called. "So are wolves," Maya said, and kept walking. Behind her in the mansion on the bluff, Jonathan opened the cookbook to hide the plaque rubbing and found a stained index card he didn't remember ever reading. Grace's looping hand. "If we ever forget what the money is for, bake bread and take it to the clinic. Sit in the waiting room. Listen." He set the card on the counter, took out a bag of flour and measured by memory rather than app. As the yeast woke and the dough rose under a damp towel, alarms slept and cameras watched a man moving through a kitchen like it belonged to the living again. Farther downriver, in a glass office with a bowl of perfect apples, Evelyn read the clinic post and smiled thinly. "Plan B," she said to no one. "If we can't buy their halo, we'll bend it." And somewhere out in the dark between the bluff and the block, a courier rode with a thumb drive for a reporter, full of doctored disbursement sheets somebody would swear came from Marshlight's books. The leak landed on a Tuesday at 6:42 a.m., not in a newspaper, but on a glossy local news account that fed on outrage and ad clicks. A carousel of screenshots claimed Marshlight had routed thousands to friends and family. With one image zoomed on a line item, "Brooks Grocery, $12,000. The caption did the rest. "Housekeeper turned director. Funnels cash home while Whittaker looks away." By 7:30 a.m., 2 TV vans were idling outside the storefront office. By 8 hours, someone had glued the lock. Maya arrived with a thermos and a patience she had to build minute by minute. She switched to the alley door, let Ruth and Hank in with a shoulder tilt shove, and laid out a simple plan on the folding table they used as a desk. "First rule," she said, "we don't chase lies. We publish receipts. Elliot?" Elliot, in from his home office with a laptop that looked like it had solved crimes, nodded. "Full ledger, line by line, with redactions only where privacy law demands. Hash each PDF, post the hashes. If anyone wants to compare, the math won't lie." Arya, sleeves rolled, hair pinned, sketched the legal posture on a yellow pad. "Cease and desist to the outlet that posted. Separate demand to Whittaker Holdings, if we can link the leak to them. Preserve everything, email, texts, drafts. From this minute, treat your phone like it could be evidence." Jonathan texted once, "I'm at your disposal. What do you need?" Maya typed her reply like she was reminding her own hands. "Bring bread for the team, sit, listen." At 9:10, a crowd gathered, neighbors, staff from the clinic, moms with strollers who had promised themselves they would not get involved until the clinic post had made them cry. Her man in a pressed shirt, no tie, media casual, raised his phone just high enough to be noticed and asked, "Ms. Brooks, did Marshlight fund your mother's store?" "No," Maya said into the morning air, "and it won't until we publish criteria, and the store applies like anyone else." She held up a printout. "We have made 12 grants to date. You'll see amounts, zip codes, and invoices. No names." Ruth pulled out a library stamp she'd brought for fun and thumped paid across photocopies of utility receipts as if baptizing them. Hank stood at the door with his dockworker's stance that said not this time to anyone who tried to push past. The damage, though, wasn't only outside. At 10:37, Elliot looked up from his screen. "We've got attempts on the admin portal," he said. 3 from a mobile IP in-state. 1 from an IP block that screams nice office on the river. "Can't prove a river," Arya said, but her mouth tightened. At 11:02, Maya's phone buzzed. A certified email. Notice of inquiry. Attorney General's Charities Bureau. Someone had filed a complaint. The letter was bland and lethal. "Please preserve all records related to Marshlight disbursements for the last 24 months. Provide a preliminary report within 10 business days. Maya felt the hitch in her chest and named it, because naming made it smaller. Fear. She handed the letter to Arya. We knew this could happen, Arya said. It isn't an indictment. It's a flashlight. Then we clean the room, Maya said, and went back to work. They instituted controls that afternoon that would have taken other startups months. Dual authorization for any payment above $1,000. A second signatory who wasn't Maya or Jonathan. Read-only bank access for Elliot. Daily ledger snapshots stored offline. They posted a short explainer in plain English and Spanish. How to apply, how decisions are made, who votes, how to appeal. The tone was not defensive. It sounded like a neighbor on a porch explaining the rules of a pickup game. At 1:15 p.m., the storefront lights flickered. Hank glanced up. Storm? He said, though the sky was spotless. Priya, just in from the clinic with updated receipts, checked her phone. Power's fine 3 blocks over, she said. Y'all, I hate to say it, but somebody's playing with the grid. Maya stepped outside and saw the black sedan half a block down, window cracked, engine purring. Philip Crane's silhouette in the driver's seat was as neat as a chess piece. He didn't wave. He didn't have to. Back inside, Elliot's voice went flat. They didn't just fake PDFs, he said. They cloned our invoice template and backfilled numbers that add up to exactly the rumor. 12 grand to Brooks, 7 to Friends of St. Bart's, which doesn't exist. Look. He tapped metadata. Author tag, E&M Dev PR Amateur Hour. They didn't wipe the properties. Arya's eyes lit with a prosecutor's gladness at a defendant who left fingerprints. We need chain of custody. Save the files, take screenshots, export headers. If this goes to the AG, they'll want to see not just that it's false, but where it came from. Around 2, a brick clacked onto the storefront stoop. No smashed glass. A message, not a break-in. The paper rubber-banded to it was typed, "Stay in your lane." Next to the sentence, a printout of the same doctored ledger page with a new circle, the clinic check. Whoever had sent it wanted the fear to feel local. Jonathan arrived then with 3 still warm loaves and that paper bag awkwardness of a man learning how to show up without a checkbook. He set the bread down and took a chair like a student. When he saw the brick note, his jaw worked. Don't, Maya said quietly. I wasn't going to, he lied, then corrected himself because shame was a new muscle he was trying to grow. I was going to call Voss and threaten his garden. That's your war, she said. Marshlight does ours with receipts. At 4 word spread of a community forum at the Civic Hall. The flyer had appeared overnight. No organizer credits, no host. Just a time, a place, and the question, should Marshlight be trusted? The hall filled with folding chairs and fluorescent light, and the smell of old coffee. Maya didn't want to go. Arya insisted. If you don't, the story writes itself, she said. If you do, you frame the next paragraph. They sat in the front row, Maya, Ruth, Hank, Priya, Elliot. Jonathan sat 3 rows back with Lila, so it wouldn't look like a billionaire had brought an entourage to church. The moderator, a man whose blazer might have run for office in the 90s, opened the floor. A woman in scrubs stood first, Bree, the single mother whose utility bill had been the first Marshlight check. You can trust what you can see, she said, holding up a printed ledger page she'd pulled from the website. I saw my lights stay on. I saw my kids do homework without the library closing on us at 6. If you don't want to trust Marshlight because she, a nod at Maya, isn't fancy enough, that's your heart, not her books. A man with a lapel pin took the mic next. Southeastern Harbour Capital has pledged jobs, he said, and the way he said pledged made it sound like a blessing. With partnerships, we can have both development and compassion. Sir, Ruth said, not waiting for the mic, we've had partnerships before. They were called promises. Maya rose when she had to because gravity works and told the room what they were doing. Not a speech, a list. Grants under 2,500, 2 signatures. Audits posted quarterly. A hotline that did not ring in Whitaker's house. She told them the AG had opened an inquiry and that Marshlight had welcomed it. She said the word inquiry without flinching, then said the word welcome with enough force to make it true. The man with the lapel pin tried again. If Mr. Whitaker would just confirm... Jonathan stood up in the 3rd row and spoke like he was answering a question in a deposition. Jonathan Whitaker, donor. Marshlight does not take instruction from me. I have not asked it to launder my reputation. Anyone who says otherwise is either misinformed or hoping you are. The room made that low sound groups make when a fact clicks into place. It didn't end the argument. It redrew the map. Afterward, as the hall emptied into a purple-gold evening, Caleb intercepted Maya by the side steps. He wore expensive contrition well. "Miss Brooks," he said, soft enough to force her to lean in. "You're in over your head." She looked at him as if he had told her it was raining. "Maybe," she said. "We're learning to swim anyway." "You don't have to," he said. "My sister and I can make all this friction disappear. You'll get your work funded. The grocery will find relief. We can put a real team around you. Compliance, PR, development. All above board." She knew there was a recording device somewhere. There always was when powerful people said the word compliance like a sedative. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't need the tape. She would take the memory. "Your offer," she said, "is that I sell the one thing that makes Marshlight worth $1. The fact that it doesn't answer to you." He didn't blink. "My offer is that you stop being poor the hard way." There it was. Not even ugly, just naked. She stepped back, not as retreat but as permission for him to leave. "I grew up running tabs at bodegas," she said. "We learned early that debt changes the way you stand. Marshlight isn't going to hunch for you." He smiled, a little sad for the camera she couldn't see. "Clocks are hungry," he said, borrowing Crane's line like family silver. "And so are courts," she said, walking past him. That night the sabotage changed shape. It stopped flirting with rumor and tried to pry open the bank. At 1:12 a.m., Elliot's monitoring pinged. An attempted password reset on the Marshlight account, followed by a SIM swap request on Maya's phone number. The request was denied because Elliot had already dragged their two-factor off text and into a physical key he'd clipped to Maya's keychain like a charm. At 1:39, an admin login succeeded on the public website. Someone uploaded a revised ledger, swapping PDF files for the doctored ones, and adding a footer that screamed transparency. For 6 minutes, the wrong numbers sat on the live site. At 1:45, a scheduled job replaced them with the real ones. Elliot's paranoia finally paying rent. He traced the login path backward until the signal hit a familiar firewall, the guest network at the Whitaker estate. At 2:03 a.m., the storefront's motion sensor snapped 2 stills. A courier at the back door, hoodie up, gloved hands slipping a padded envelope through the mail slot. Inside, a USB stick labeled Ledger, Real. Maya found it at 7:10 a.m. when she pushed the mail slot open with a ruler and caught the envelope before it hit the floor. She didn't plug it in. She placed it in a Ziploc, signed across the seal, and took a photo. Then she texted Arya, evidence bagged, chain of custody intact. At 8:05, the health department walked into Lila's store with a clipboard and a face that did not want to be the bad guy. "Anonymous complaint," the inspector said, already apologizing with his eyes. "We have to check the cooler temps. The milk case was fine. The deli case was 2 degrees high." It earned a warning, not a closure, but the paper on the door felt like a scar. Lila called Maya to tell her not to come, which is how Maya knew to go anyway, because strength sometimes hides in the wrong words. By noon, they had 3 volunteers resetting the cooler gaskets, a borrowed fan blowing across the condenser, and a receipt from the service tech Ruth had bullied into a same-day slot. Bree showed up on her lunch break with her brother. Luis mopped. Jonathan installed himself at the register and made exact change like a man learning a new language. People watched him and then stopped watching him because money looks less mythic when it counts quarters. The day ended with a tired board and a clear decision. Maya stood at the folding table and said, "They want shadows. We'll choose light." Elliot set up a live ledger room, camera on, screen share of the books, Q&A open. "Tomorrow at 7, he said. "Anyone can watch us reconcile every line. We'll publish the replay. We'll publish the spreadsheet. We'll publish my mother's lasagna recipe if it keeps the trolls busy." Arya smirked. "Add a tip jar for the AG's overtime." They laughed, and the laughter wasn't brave. It was necessary. Outside, the river did what rivers do, moved steadily toward a larger thing. Across town, in a glass office, Evelyn watched the rumor curve fail to take, and her smile thinned to a wire. "Then we push," she said to Voss, sliding him a drive. "Tomorrow before their little show, leak this to a real outlet. Make sure it sings." "What is it?" Voss asked. "Their disbursement sheet," she said. And is it? It will be by morning, Evelyn said. At the Bluff House, Jonathan stared at a paused frame on an overlooked camera. The service entrance at 1:42 a.m., a courier's hand passing something flat and ugly through a slot. He didn't need to zoom to know the outline of the bag, or to recognize the shadow carved on the gravel by the porch light. He called Maya. You should see this, he said. I will, she said. And then we're going to show everybody. The exclusive hit before sunrise. At 6:11 a.m., the city's most respectable daily pushed a banner. Charity under state scrutiny. Disbursements to director's family raise. Questions. The article carried blurred internal ledgers, a quote, from a source familiar with the Attorney General's inquiry, and the line that did the damage. Brooks Grocery, $12,000 by 6:30. The bank's fraud team called Elliot. Standard practice, the woman said, voice neutral. Temporary hold on outgoing wires pending review. In a foundation built to move money in hours, temporary was a blade. Maya read the story once through without blinking. Then she set her phone face down and said, to the empty kitchen and the half-cold coffee, We do the work. At 7:05, Jonathan called. Come by, he said. There's something you should see. She rode the bus through a city already forming opinions and found him in the estate's small security office, more metal shelves than drama, a folding chair, a humming rack of equipment that kept careful track of comings and goings. He cued an overlooked camera, the one nobody ever checked unless a raccoon tripped it. The timestamp read 01:42:09. The frame showed the service entrance, the porch light throwing a hard-edged shadow. A courier in a hoodie slipped a padded envelope through the mail slot. The posture was practiced. The hand that withdrew wore a narrow signet ring that caught the light for half a second. Jonathan tapped a second screen, router logs. Guest network, he said. A device hit our Wi-Fi at 1:40 a.m., then again at 1:45. MAC address labeled EvePad in the old DHCP table. He winced at the label. Our house manager names everything. I never changed it. Device names are not proof, Maya said, steady, but they are a map. And the shore? He asked. We show the tide charts, she answered. And let the Attorney General bring the subpoenas. Back at the storefront, the team was already moving. Arya had a legal pad divided into 3 columns, bank, AG, press. Elliot had 3 monitors up. The article, the live bank portal, frozen, and a checksum window that looked like a curtain of code. They cleaned the metadata, Elliot said, tapping the newspaper's PDFs. No author field this time, but they left the tells. And what tells? Ruth asked, arms folded like a librarian facing a noisy study hall. Folio numbers, Elliot said, eyes bright. We seed each draft with a different invisible pattern, line spacing on every 7th row, and a microkern on the letter pair RN, canary text. The version that leaked uses a spacing sequence we only sent to one inbox, Vossa Holdings. Arya didn't smile. She only underlined twice, chain of custody, print the original emails, export headers, screenshot the sent list. We will not get cute. We will get admissible. Maya took the call from the AG's Charities Bureau on speaker. A calm voice asked for voluntary production by end of day, bank statements, payment approvals, ledgers, and any materials relevant to disbursements flagged in the press. We'll deliver by 5, Maya said, and we'll host an open ledger session at 7, live. You are invited to observe. A pause, then we'll have someone there by mid-morning. The respectable daily doubled down with a push alert and a thinly sourced line about pending legal action to freeze funds. 15 minutes later, Voss filed an emergency petition, a petition for temporary restraining order to prevent further dissipation of assets under investigation. The hearing would be at 4:30 p.m., conveniently, 90 minutes before Marshlight's live ledger. Of course, Arya said, slipping the petition into a red folder. We'll meet them there. At noon, the clinic called. Power bills paid, Priya said, relief audible. But if the hold stays through Friday, payroll will bounce. We'll be off hold by tonight, Maya said, making a promise she had no right to make and every obligation to keep. They rehearsed the ledger show like a surgical team. Elliot built a read-only mirror of the accounting system. Ruth wrote a 1-page guide for anyone watching. What a ledger line means, how ACH postings work, where to look for double authorization. Hank agreed to moderate chat like it was a dockyard argument. Keep it honest, keep it clean. Lila delivered a tray of empanadas and a kiss to Maya's hair that stuck like a benediction. At 3:55 p.m., Arya and Maya walked into a courtroom with bad acoustics and the polite antagonism of lawyers who ate the same deli sandwiches. Jonathan slid into the back row, tie on, grief tucked away. Voss stood with a stack of exhibits, printouts of the article and the ledger. Irreparable harm, he said, and the words found easy purchase in the air. The public trust is at stake. A brief pause on disbursements until the state completes its review is only prudent. Arya didn't argue the headline. She argued the mechanics. Your Honor, Marshlight's books are, not to overstate this, boringly clean. We have dual signatories, daily snapshots, and third-party verification. The newspaper's ledger does not match our checksums, our bank statements, or our approvals. We can demonstrate the discrepancies live tonight publicly. Freezing a first responder fund on the basis of a PDF someone slipped under a door would cause the irreparable harm. The judge, a woman with the precise voice of someone who'd graded papers before law school, looked over her glasses. Ms. Feldman, how quickly can you put your money where your mouth is? 7 p.m., Your Honor, Arya said. And I'll hand your clerk a copy of every document at 5, Voss pushed. Your Honor, Mr. Voss, the judge said mildly, if their public numbers don't match, we'll talk again in the morning. She rapped the gavel once, more for punctuation than authority. No TRO at this time. Counsel will produce documents by 5 p.m. We'll reconvene if needed. Outside, microphones appeared like dandelions. Maya said nothing. Arya said, see you at 7. Jonathan kept his eyes on the courthouse steps and his hands in his pockets, as if he were remembering how to be just one man leaving a public building. At 4:55, the AG runner took a banker's box and a thumb drive. At 6:59, Elliot hit Go Live. The camera showed a plain table, a flat screen with a ledger, and 5 people who looked like a neighborhood. Maya, Ruth, Hank, Priya, Elliot. No logo wall. No donor backdrop. The viewer count ticked upward, 80, then 200. Then 4 figures as the local daily's push alert linked the stream with a grudging foundation to livestream books. Evening, Hank said, leaning toward the mic like it was a friend. This is Marshlight. We move small money fast. Tonight we're showing you how. For the first 20 minutes it was math and receipts. Elliot opened the bank portal, hold icon still visible, matched each outgoing payment to an approved ledger line, clicked into PDFs with watermarks and timestamps. Ruth explained in that librarian cadence how to read an invoice. Priya held up the clinic's paid bill and, more important, the fridge's temperature log. Maya narrated criteria and blind spots in the same breath. We're missing Vietnamese translation. That's on me. We'll fix it this week. The chat scrolled, skeptical, curious, sometimes kind. A reporter tried to derail with a copy-paste of the exclusive PDF. Elliot smiled thinly. We thought you might, he said. So let's talk about canaries. He pulled up 2 versions of the same ledger, one real, one fake. He zoomed until the letters looked like city blocks. See the run in earnings, he said. In our internal drafts, every copy had a different kerning on that pair. Think of it like a fingerprint. The leaked PDF uses the exact spacing we sent to one inbox, vossawhiteacreholdings.com. That doesn't prove who pushed send. It does prove where the eagle stole the egg. A new viewer joined, the AG's office, username Bland. 10 seconds later, the respectable Daily's City desk appeared in the chat and asked for the canary explanation again. Elliot gave it, slower, cleaner, with a downloadable explainer he'd written at lunch. Where's the $12,000 to Brooks Grocery? Another commenter demanded. Maya clicked to an empty line. Nowhere, she said. It does not exist. Can you prove a negative? The commenter fired back. Bank statements, Elliot said. Opening the month's PDF, he scrolled every page, highlighted every outbound ACH, and then, because trust grows in redundancies, opened the bank's CSV export and ran a quick query live, where payee like %Brooks%. The cursor blinked and returned null. Next rumor, Hank said dry. Halfway through, a new square appeared on the stream, an in-person camera the team had set up for in-room questions. The first to the mic was a man in a press pass. Isn't this just savvy crisis PR, he asked. Priya lifted a cooler, set it on the table and opened the lid. Frosted vials sat inside a plastic cradle. The camera misted for a second with the cold. This is insulin, she said. It didn't thaw this week because a check cleared last week. That's not PR, that's a fridge humming. Near the back of the room, the door opened. Caleb Whitaker slid into a seat, contrition tailored to his jawline. He raised a hand. Ms. Brooks, he said, voice pitched to gentle. If mistakes were made, surely the prudent course is to pause operations voluntarily until confidence is restored. Hank didn't bother with the mic. So with respect, my paycheck didn't pause when confidence dipped. Neither did the light bill. Maya met Caleb's eyes. We did pause for 4 hours because the bank put us on hold, she said. We're unfrozen at 8 a.m. tomorrow, unless a judge says otherwise. Between now and then, we'll be answering questions and paying exactly 3 things: a hospice electric bill, a tow to get a caregiver to work, and a prescription copay that a mother can't split into installments. Caleb smiled for the cameras. I'm only here as a concerned citizen. Then take a number, Ruth said. There's a line. Elliot brought up the router log printouts from the estate. He did not name Evelyn. He did not show the ring. He pointed to times and MAC addresses and explained, like a patient teacher, what a DHCP lease was and why the labels on devices were helpful but not final. These logs are now in the hands of the Attorney General, Arya said, stepping into frame for the first time. We will not try this part of the case on YouTube. A woman from the AG's office stood in the back, a plain blazer, a pen that took notes like rain. She held up a card. Thank you, she said, and left it at that. They closed the stream with something that wasn't quite a speech. Maya looked into the lens the way you look at a person, not an audience. If you're watching because you want a scandal, she said, you're going to get bored. This is receipts and temperate fridges, and a dock worker arguing with a spreadsheet. If you're watching because you need help, the hotline is on the screen. If you're watching because you want to help, there's a list of boring things we need. Translation, rides, a lawyer who can explain a lease without charging rent for the explanation. We'll post this recording, and every line of our ledger. We'll be wrong sometimes. We'll say so out loud. Viewers trickled out like a choir dismissing itself row by row. After the camera went dark, nobody moved for a moment. Then the room exhaled. Maya's phone buzzed. The bank hold lifted. Zuidkarings tomorrow. Another buzz. The respectable Daily City desk requesting comment on their correction. The sidebar now read, Foundation disputes leaked documents. AG confirms receipt of original books. A third buzz. A text Jonathan could see over her shoulder, because she let him. An unknown number with a photo of the grocery's front window and a caption that belonged on a ransom movie. Clocks are still hungry. Lila, who had stayed off camera and on prayer, took the phone, read the line, and handed it back with the face she used when the soup needed salt and the world needed less drama. Wolves always think time is on their side, she said. They forget about doors and neighbors. Jonathan walked Maya to the door. On the way out, he stopped by Priya's cooler and touched the plastic lid with 2 fingers, as if he could bless it. My daughter is not going to stop, he said, honest as a bruise. I know, Maya said. Neither are we. At the bluff, the night felt thinner, as if the house had lost a little of its old appetite for secrets. Jonathan went back to the security room and ran the service entrance clip again. This time, after the courier's hand slipped the envelope through the slot, he paused on the shadow, the shape of a shoulder, the way it turned to go, the flash of the signet ring. He sent the still to Arya with a single line, for the AG, not the press. Across the river, in a glass office lit too bright for midnight, Evelyn watched the stream replay with her chin in her palm. Voss, grey and careful, closed his laptop. They threaded the needle, he said. Evelyn didn't look up. She texted a message that was only 2 words, Plan C, then attached a photo taken that afternoon. A signed purchase agreement from Southeastern Harbour Capital for a portfolio of distressed neighbourhood notes. At the top of the list, in crisp sans serif, was Brooks' Grocery. She hit send, stood, and finally smiled. Tomorrow the war would move from ledgers to liens. The summons arrived in a plain white envelope slipped under the storefront door. Community hearing, Town Hall, Friday, 6 p.m. It was unsigned, but everyone knew who had orchestrated it. Evelyn Whittaker had spent the week whispering in boardrooms, buying distressed notes, and courting council members who liked their campaign coffers full. Now she wanted spectacle, a stage where Marshlight would stumble in front of cameras, and the Whittaker siblings could seize the narrative. By Friday evening, the Civic Hall was packed, folding chairs set in uneven rows, a podium dragged from the high school, microphones sprouting like weeds. On one side sat neighbors with handwritten signs, "Keep Marshlight in the light, hands off our stores." On the other, developers in tailored suits, lawyers with thin briefcases, and a smattering of local officials who pretended not to check their phones. Maya entered with the board, Ruth's braid tight, Hank in his work jacket, Priya carrying a folder fat with clinic records, Elliot hugging his laptop like scripture. Jonathan followed at a distance, jacket buttoned, expression carved from stone. Lila took a seat near the aisle, arms folded, ready to catch her daughter with silence if words failed. The moderator, the same blazered man from the last forum, banged a gavel borrowed from a school play. "We are here," he said, "to discuss whether Marshlight Foundation can be trusted with community funds, and whether its association with the Whittaker family constitutes a conflict of interest." Evelyn rose first, perfect posture, voice smooth as glass. "Ladies and gentlemen, no one doubts the nobility of charity. But when charity becomes a shield for mismanagement, we all suffer. Marshlight is headed by a young woman with no credentials, no financial training, and no accountability. We've seen suspicious ledgers, rapid disbursements without oversight, and," she let the pause stretch, "familial entanglements. The Brooks Grocery, a failing business, is now tied directly to Mr. Whittaker's private crusade. How long before community funds are siphoned to cover personal debts?" Murmurs rippled. A few heads nodded. A reporter scribbled. Maya walked to the mic. She didn't raise her voice. "I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a developer. I'm a daughter who watched her cousin live because of a stranger's donation. That donation came from Jonathan Whittaker and his wife Grace. Marshlight exists to pass that mercy forward. Every dollar we've disbursed is public, posted, verified, and audited. If you doubt, check the site. If you still doubt, call the Attorney General's office. They've had our books for a week." Evelyn smirked. "Fine words. But words don't pay debts. Shall we talk about the $12,000 allegedly given to your mother's store?" "Let's," Maya said. She motioned to Elliot, who projected a ledger on the wall. Line by line, transactions scrolled. Utilities, medical bills, rent relief. "No Brooks Grocery." Elliot highlighted a query. "Where payee like % Brooks %. The result, null, fabricated," Maya said simply. "Sourced from your office." She turned to the crowd. "We found the watermark. Canary text seeded in the files. The fake ledger only existed in one inbox, Voss, your counsel." Gasps, a low rumble of anger. The moderator hammered the gavel. Evelyn's smile thinned, but she didn't break. "Even if true," Evelyn said, "perception matters. And perception is poison when trust is fragile. Why should we gamble our city's future on a charity run from a folding table?" Jonathan rose then, slow and deliberate, and the room tilted toward him. He walked to the mic with the weight of decades in his shoulders. "Because the folding table feeds people while your developments evict them." His voice, rusty from years of silence, filled the hall. "Yes, I am Jonathan Whittaker. Yes, my children seek to build towers. But do not confuse their ambition with my consent. Marshlight does not answer to me. It does not launder my sins. It answers to its board and to the people it serves." He pulled a folder from his jacket and spread photographs on the podium, Caleb leaving the estate with a courier bag at 1 a.m. Evelyn's device login from the guest network, the metadata trail Elliot had traced. "These are facts. My children forged ledgers, filed false complaints, and attempted to strangle this foundation. They framed an honest woman because honesty inconvenienced them. You want to talk about perception? Perception is a mirror. Tonight you see yourselves in it." The hall erupted. Shouts, applause, flashes from cameras. Evelyn tried to interject, but the moderator, sensing the tide, let the noise run. Ruth thumped the table with her library stamp as if sealing the moment. "Paid." Caleb pushed to his feet, face pale. "You think you can destroy us with theatrics?" He hissed. "You built this empire. We only learned from you." Jonathan's reply was quiet, almost gentle. If you learned only greed, then I failed you as a father. Tonight I am trying not to fail this town." The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. Evelyn gathered her papers, jaw tight, and walked out. Caleb followed, shoulders hunched. The suits shuffled after them, phones pressed to ears already calculating damage control. When the hall emptied, the ones who stayed were the neighbors, the mothers, the dock workers, the clinic nurse with her receipts. They surrounded Maya, pressed hands to her shoulders, thanked her for light. Lila hugged her daughter once, hard, then stepped back so others could. Jonathan lingered by the door, watching, not intruding. For the first time in years, he felt something stir that wasn't suspicion or grief. It was fragile, almost foreign. It was belonging. Outside, cameras waited. Reporters clamored. One shouted, "Mr. Whitaker, what happens next?" He paused on the steps, let the night air cool his face, and answered, "What happens next is work. And for once in this family's history, work will mean trust." Behind him, the lights of the hall burned late, and for the first time in a long time, the town looked more awake than afraid. The weeks that followed the hearing did not feel like triumph. They felt like cleanup after a storm, water receding, mud thick, neighbors sweeping porches with quiet resolve. The smear campaigns fizzled, the bank unfroze the accounts, and the Attorney General's office released a preliminary note. No evidence of misappropriation found. Investigation ongoing but non-adverse. It wasn't vindication, but it was enough. Marshlight went back to its rhythm. The hotline buzzing, the board vetting grants, Ruth stamping receipts, Hank hauling chairs. Priya kept the clinic's fridge humming. Elliot fine-tuned the ledgers until even skeptics admitted they were boring. And Maya, every morning, opened her notebook and wrote down 3 words at the top of a fresh page. See, serve, stay. At the Bluff House, Jonathan walked rooms that felt less like tombs. The library window stayed open wider now, curtains breathing with the marsh wind. He still checked the cameras, still locked doors, but his eyes no longer clung to the screens like lifelines. Some evenings, he joined Maya at the storefront, listening while neighbors spoke their needs out loud. More than once he found himself simply carrying boxes, serving coffee, or counting out change at Lila's counter. No one called him sir, they called him neighbor. The children, Evelyn and Caleb, remained silent in public, their lawyers huddled in glass offices, their influence bruised. Their absence was its own admission, a shadow that no longer swallowed the room. One evening, as the sun slid across the river, Maya returned from a long day to find Jonathan waiting on the porch of the grocery. He held a loaf of bread wrapped in a linen towel. "My wife used to say," he began, "that bread is proof. You can't fake the rise. Either you waited or you didn't. Either you trusted the yeast or you killed it." Maya smiled, weary but whole. And Marshlight is proof," he said. "Not of me, of you. Of the town. Of trust." He set the loaf on the counter, hands trembling not from age but from the weight of letting go. Inside, Lila sliced the bread, handed pieces to customers who'd come for milk and stayed for warmth. Kids ate with butter dripping down their fingers. A dock worker laughed with a nurse. The grocery, once a failing corner store, felt like a hearth. Jonathan lingered in the doorway, the hum of voices filling him the way boardrooms never had. For the first time since Grace's death, he felt her presence not as absence but as continuity, her handwriting in Maya's rules, her laughter in Ruth's stubbornness, her mercy in every receipt pinned to the corkboard. As dusk fell, Maya pinned a single sentence on the community bulletin board in thick marker. "Family isn't built by blood. It's built by trust." The crowd read it, nodded, and went back to their bread, their groceries, their small lives newly steadied. Outside, the night folded itself around the river. The mansion on the bluff stood quieter, less like a fortress, more like a house with its windows open. And for the first time in years, Jonathan Whitaker didn't need cameras to tell him the truth. He had people. He had trust. He had at last a home,